Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I am eager as I can possibly be to introduce our guests to you. But before I do, I'd like to say thank you to some people that we always thank. We want to thank brassandwinds.com. Mighty Quinn Brass and Winds are where we go when we're looking for brass or woodwind instruments for our students here at Willow Music. We think you will find them the best people to talk to as well. Welcome to my musical mind. This is Truer MU, the truth about music. And I'm excited, as always, to share my guest with you. But before I do, there's usually a story, and in this case, there's a good one. One of the highlights of my life at Oberlin College was being cast in the musical Sweeney Todd. It was a truly great experience, and the cast was stellar. Some of that cast have gone on to great careers in various aspects of the music business. The man who had the lead in that show, Mr. Bob McDonald, he was just tremendous. And there he is. Let me tell you a little bit about Bob McDonald. Bass baritone Bob McDonald enjoys a diverse career across many artistic disciplines, including musical theater, opera, and the concert stage, as well as his job as a baritone, announcer, and senior producer for the United States Army Chorus. An avid sports fan, Bob is a familiar face to DC hockey fans as a regular national anthem singer for the Washington Capitals. Bob, welcome to our show.
Thank you, Adam.
It's
And I
great to
just,
have you.
it's great to be here. And I should just add, I'm sure they can figure this out based on how I look, that I'm no longer working for the Army. Uh, but I did do that for nearly 27 years.
Yeah.
So,
Well, as you know from having watched the show yourself, we've interviewed a lot of singers and a lot of people affiliated with opera on our show. I thought your career was one of the most interesting, and I wanted to get a chance to talk about it, not just to get to know you better, but also to help other singers who are aspiring and want to, what are the various paths you can take. You took a very interesting one. Why don't we start just at the beginning? I like to sometimes start at the beginning with, you know, when did you even get it in your head that you were a musician?
so I started as a violinist when I believe I was about 6 years old. I started doing the Suzuki method of violin. And apparently that happened because I was in a toy store with my mother and I saw a toy violin and I got very excited. So what did my mother do? Being an awesome mother, she was like, "I'm going to get him violin lessons." So I was a fiddle player for a long time, and I played long enough. I actually almost minored in it at Oberlin. I did some lessons while at Oberlin, and there's a community orchestra here that I play in off and on. Um, so I'm really feel so lucky to have had that violin background, especially when I started singing. I just got to the point though with violin where I had too many other things like with sports, and to get to the next level, I just couldn't practice that level. And I was like, oh, singers don't need to practice that much.
So,
So in high school,
yeah.
I started I started singing, and just kind of didn't really, because my father's a professional singer, so I sort of fought that for a while, just because you don't want to, when you're a certain age, you don't really want to do what your dad does. But then I found out I had something in there. Genetics were at work, and soon after I was auditioning for Oberlin, and I guess being a high school boy that sang, they were very interested in me.
Well, not a whole lot of parents would, get on board with, "Hey, mom and dad, I think I want to audition for a music school in voice." Were they gung ho for this, or did you have to convince them?
No, I think, because my dad had had a career as a singer. I think, maybe behind the scenes there was some stuff like them going, "Oh no, what is he going to do to eat?" Um, but no, they were nothing but, and also, they knew Oberlin, regardless of what degree I got, they knew I was going to get a great education and become a great human just from the Oberlin experience. I think so. I think they were thrilled that I was looking at such a great school. Um,
Well, before we talk about Oberlin, you mentioned that you were glad to have your violin training as a singer. Could you talk a little bit about what your violin training provided you as a singer?
I think it's just simple musicianship. I think it's just making music and um, you know, legato line. I mean, there's just so much in within the term music that you do as a violinist, and breath. And
Mm.
some of the best violin teachers that I know have their students listen to great singers. So there's certainly always been a connection between singing and violin. And and not to mention just the Suzuki method, which is all about ear, doing things by ear. I think that was, obviously I learned to read music as well, but I think that was a really just for sight singing stuff. And when I started singing in choruses, I could just sort of in my mind do what I would do on violin, and it would get into my head, the notes as into my voice, kind of. So all kinds of things. But the best compliment, a couple of years back, I did a gig with an orchestra, and I was singing a Mahler song, and the concert mistress asked me after the first rehearsal. She said, "Do you play violin?" And I was like, "Oh my god, that was the best compliment ever."
That's amazing, actually.
I
How did,
know.
yeah. Any
Yeah,
idea
I
how
don't
they,
know. I don't know if it was like phrasing or she just, I don't know, but it was, I was like, wow, it was pretty cool.
well, I mean, it's interesting that professional singers, if you're going to go for a career as a professional singer, chorus is going to be something maybe you do occasionally for fun, but it's not your focus. Your focus is I'm going to be a star of some sort. I'm going to be singing by myself. But if you're a professional violin player, you're most likely going to be a pack animal. I mean, very few violinists are going to be soloists. Most of them are going to be in orchestras or chamber groups. Can you talk about these different mindsets and how they work for you?
Yeah, I always enjoyed sitting in the back of the second violins and digging into New World Symphony or something. I think yeah, that's an interesting question. I've never really thought. I think that's one of the great things about playing violin is that I was able to do some solos, and I was did some quartet work and to play in an orchestra. And I suppose that later on in my singing career, I never really thought I would be singing in a chorus for a living. But that's exactly what I did. So I would say probably a lot of my work with orchestras and chamber music certainly helped me once I joined the Army Chorus um, and started doing that. And I didn't, little did I know that it would, but it turned out to be a helpful thing for sure.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my guests went to Oberlin because a lot of them are friends of mine, and I've talked to them about Oberlin. And for a lot of them, Oberlin was an eye opener, a real game changer for them. Was it for you? Did it knock you on your butt?
Yeah, I mean, I think on so many levels, I had really not been around. I had come from a not so diverse background growing up, and when I came to Oberlin, just the for musical reasons, for so many reasons. And I was, we were all kids, we were babies, and I was ready to be molded into. And Oberlin was just perfect because it just, the so many special people that touched our lives, right, and that we continue to. I mean, I just feel like everyone, we all kind of like the same things and we're passionate about the same things. And um I came in, I think one of the cool things for me, I came in not really knowing that it was going to be that way.
Hmm.
I came in because they gave me, a really great scholarship, and I knew it was a good school, and I was just like, I was wanted. I sang for Richard Miller, and he was like, "I want you in my studio," and so I was just like, but I didn't know that it was gonna. I didn't know I would get all this bonus stuff, and taking classes in the college, and things I still remember to this day that have just turned me into. And then not to mention the performing. What how we connected. I mean, just the
Mhm.
fact that I was able to no graduate students. I had auditioned for, Indiana University and Eastman, and I would have done, you know, one third of what I did, got to do at Oberlin right there.
Yeah.
I mean, no, just to be able and all that student theater. I mean, when I look at my resume just from Oberlin, I defy anyone to come up with as good a list of things that I got to do in my 5 years. I ended up staying a fifth year and getting the master's in opera theater. Um,
Right.
so
I'm glad you pointed that out. It's I don't know how many of my listeners know this, but I wasn't in the conservatory. I was just in the college. And you mentioned opportunities. And yes, we were both in this show together, and it was student directed. And all of this was possible because the school was small and because the conservatory and the college were very nicely linked. And someone like me could actually get a chance to sing with someone like you in a great show.
Yeah. I mean, what was your major?
Oh, I was an English major.
Ah, okay.
And see where that
Very
got
nice.
me.
Well, yeah, hey, yeah, well, that was, I mean, and that, but that was what was so great about Oberlin too, is like, even, it didn't matter what your major was like, you almost everybody played an instrument or appreciated, some art form in some way. And that was so evident everywhere you went.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Conservatory people that, could have easily been, science majors, or, that just decided to like dive into the violin and try and get a symphony gig.
Or someone like Heidi Moss Erickson, who went both routes and became a great singer and a great scientist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I know you've had on here.
On our show. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Check it out. Um,
Yes.
so let's talk a little bit about conservatory singing. There are several types of singers at conservatories, and among them are the people that are the most common, I'm sorry to say, are the people that are in the conservatory learning to sing because they've got a talent for it and they're there. They don't really have a vision for themselves as singers going forward. They don't know whether they're going to do it for a career. Some of them might not have even asked the question, am I? They're just there. And that's not a bad thing. Some of them will just learn to sing and it'll be a wonderful experience for them. But did you have a vision of yourself as a professional singer from the get go? Were you into that arc, or were you just kind of there because, hey, they like me and we'll see what happens?
No, I think, I'd grown up. I was in the children's chorus of all the operas, a lot of the ones that my dad was in, and I knew that I had the bug. I knew that I loved to be on stage, um, and so, and I knew I was going to a pretty major place to do this, and
Mhm.
so I think in my mind, I really, yeah, I think I was ready to. I was on the path, and until somebody told me I couldn't do it, I was gonna keep trying to do it.
Yeah. Well, and then you went ahead and got your master's, which is definitely a sign of of taking it seriously. Um,
Yeah, and that was really honestly, to stay one more year. I sort of fit a master's in because I really wanted to stay and do magic flute,
mhm,
with conducted by Maestro Spano, who,
right.
so I knew that was going to be a special experience, and it was an opportunity, and to get a master's also. I mean, it was a perfect sort of fifth year to kind of wrap everything up, and I didn't know that later on a master's would, um, come in handy, but it really, it has several times in my life. So again, it was sort of an accidental masters, and I got to sing Papageno, which is a role that I've sung, a few times now, and to do it at Oberlin was really sort of a great way to culminate the my Oberlin career.
Well, talk about this master's and how it's helped you. That's just too tempting a question.
Well, honestly, the biggest thing is, I had a dear friend who was the head of the arts department at Sidwell Friends School here in Washington, which is one of the top, private schools. Chelsea Clinton went there, and the Obama kids went there, and it's a lot of politicians' kids go there. Quaker school, wonderful place. And my friend hired me for many years to direct the musical at Sidwell, which is something that, again, my master's was in opera theater, but I got to do some directing in that, and sort of, um, but Sidwell was a place where they wouldn't let you in the door if you didn't have a master's degree,
Mhm.
just to do any. And I know there are places like that. I don't necessarily agree with it, because I think there's some wonderful people without master's degree that have, the experience of a master's degree times 10. But I needed to have a master's, and it turned out to be, one of the more rewarding parts of my career was directing these kids, and educate I should say, educating these kids. We did, guess what I directed. One of the first things I did was Sweeney Todd,
How about that?
because I just thought, I'm gonna direct the things I know, and they had an incredibly talented kids, and the sets and the orchestra. These kids really had it, so it was a great joy, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without my Oberlin masters.
Yeah, neat. Well, you had a career in the military, which is a great place for a musician to go if they can get it. Did you go immediately to the military, or was there a gap in between the Oberlin years and the military?
There was a gap. I was all set to go to either Juilliard for, their like, I guess it was called Juilliard Opera Center at the time. And I also had auditioned for Curtis Institute to kind of do whatever was next, the next thing you kind of do, and maybe some young artist programs would have been. But I was just like, after 5 years of Oberlin, and I felt like because I had a master's, I was just kind of a little bit burned out. I just didn't want to, and so I moved back to the DC area, which is where I grew up, and I got a job at a place which fit right in for me because I my job at Oberlin was working in the conservatory library,
Mhm.
which I absolutely loved because it was the fairly early days of CDs, and I would the new CDs would come in, and I could put them in the system and then go listen to them, and but my job post Oberlin then was working at Tower Records,
Yeah.
um, and so that was totally. I've always been a geek for orchestra, classical music, opera. So working in the classical room at Tower Records was a great way to just chill and have fun. And so I did that, and then I did have a few Oberlin loans sitting around, as I'm sure many of us did, and the Army had so my father was in the Army chorus, and I knew about this group because my dad was in during Vietnam, and they had an opening for a baritone, and I was kind of just like, interesting. If you give the Army 3 years, they'll pay off your college loans, and
Mhm.
like no questions asked. Like it just seemed like an incredible deal, but 3 years, I was like, gosh. Anyway, I knew enough about the group and enough guys in the group that I auditioned, and I got it. And my plan was to do 3 years and then go to New York and debt free. And and then 26 and a half years later was 2020. And
And you
but it
got
was
the rank of a sergeant major, isn't that correct?
I
Yeah.
did. They the way the Army keeps you in, they just keep promoting you if you're doing the right thing. I had every intention to. So the magic number was doing 20 years because that's when you can retire and get a pension, which is again kind of an incredible thing these days that even is still a thing. Unfortunately, for the new folks joining the military, that system is different than it was. But yeah, so I was going to do 20 years. I was going to do three, then I was going to do 20, and then I basically did 27. So, but
Now,
yes, yeah. Go
is
ahead.
this
Sorry.
just no, you're fine. I just have to ask. The way you make it sound, it's just like you forgot what time it was, or it was inertia. I mean, did you hit 3 years and make a decision, or did you just forget it was 3 years?
I think that's a good question. I'm not sure I know the answer. The bottom line is I loved the job. I loved the fact. The biggest thing for me is that I was able to do enough on the outside, uh, singing for any number of other things. I was able to moonlight enough and get my artistic itch scratched that really was the difference maker for me because I was like, wow, I've got this thing I love that's getting me a really nice. I mean, it was like an orchestra gig for a singer. This just doesn't
Hmm.
really exist.
Yeah.
Um, and I was, I mean, the job itself, we were singing, you sing at the highest levels of, from the White House on down, getting to travel. One of the first things I did was travel to President Ford's, uh, sing something for President Ford in Vail, Colorado. He was a huge fan of the Army chorus, and just, I mean, it was, I loved the job, and I loved again that I could occasionally step away, do an oratorio gig, do some theater, do some opera, and once you reach that 10-year point is kind of what they say, the point of no return. And all of a sudden it was like, oh boy, I'm in it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, did you feel at any point a sense of loss or a regret for not pursuing the bright lights of opera stardom?
I did a little bit. I mean, I feel like now, ironically, I'm starting to kind of, ponder some auditions, and um I kind of feel like I'm lucky that now the joke is, because I have a pension, I can afford to do theater. you know, Finally.
Right.
Um but I kind of feel, I don't know what it is, but I feel like vocally I'm in some ways, as strong as I've ever been. And
Mhm.
I feel like there's a freedom now that you're sort of owned by the army in the best possible way, but artistically too. It's taken me a while to kind of unarmy, and I'm just in a really good place right now that I'm looking to do some auditioning and, maybe check some boxes that I wanted to check earlier. And I have a feeling that, you know, things have changed for me in terms of what I really want, and maybe I'll try something and be like, okay, I tried it. But I mean, I've really managed to have a pretty nice career, of kind of a varied career of doing all sorts of things, which I think is something that's in, kept my army life fun. Is just I've been able to, even for the army, to sing for just the varying range of folks and music, that I got to do.
Well, tell the audience a little bit about what it's like to be in the military as a musician.
Well, I mean, it's they teach they you have to go to basic training. So they teach you how, basically you audition for the group first. This is how the army band works, and the army band here in Washington is kind of the flagship group in the army. You have to audition first, and then if they take you, then you have to go learn how to be a soldier and do all the soldier things in basic training. And when that is finished, you're active duty, and you are stationed here. I was stationed at Fort Myer here, which is just attached to Arlington Cemetery, and and just across the river from DC. And you're you're a soldier. You're a soldier musician. You have lots of army things to do. A couple times a year we had to do a PT test of, physical training, and, a run and push-ups and sit-ups. And um but then, your job is singing, your job is music. And so, some of the finest musicians in the country are in our military bands. And especially, during COVID, as orchestras were shrinking and disappearing, and the quality of the folks that are auditioning for military bands now is just unbelievable. And I've seen that change from when I got in. When I got in, it just wasn't quite as thought about as a serious option. But I think people see now, a fiddle player go and be a member of the Strolling Strings, and some of these folks have time to do some moonlighting again with some other orchestras in town. And so it's really, you know, it's kind of a thing that we should have. I've always said we should have lines out the door for these jobs, but just people, so many singers, especially, they see military. It's like, I was, I was lucky that, like I said, my dad was in the group. I knew what it was, but I can see there were several Oberlin people over the years that I said, we've got an opening coming up, you should do it. And it's just like, they're like, I can't do it. It's, for whatever reason. So.
Hmm. Right. Um, one of the interesting side gigs you got was you became one of the singers, maybe the singer for the Washington Capitals. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's one other gentleman who sings for them, who was a colleague of mine in the army, and I got him involved. And interestingly, I started singing for the Capitals before I joined the army.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's basic. I'm a huge sports fan. It all started because I didn't have any money, and they had auditions, and I was like, well, I want to see some hockey, but I don't have any money. How am I going to do this? So I went and auditioned, and um, that was right before I went to basic training, in between,
Oh,
right after Oberlin. And auditioned and started singing for them. And then when the Capitals made the Stanley Cup final in 1998, that was when it got a little more serious, and I started doing more than just a few anthems a year, and they wanted me to do more and more, and they wanted me way, a long time ago, to be the anthem singer. And given my army commitments, I couldn't really do that, and I didn't want it to be like a job. I wanted it to do. It was nice to do. So I do half of the games, which is about 20 dates a season, which is perfect. And I don't I don't receive any money. I receive something better. I get four great tickets and parking. And professional singer friends are like, "You don't get paid for that?" And I'm like, it's kind of getting paid.
Oh, so that's interesting. It's a perks job?
It's a perks job. And of course, the relationships, Adam, that I have made through this is my 30th season. And just because I can do anything I do performing in DC, I can do high art, I can do theater, I can do whatever. People are People always just know me for the hockey. And it's because every time I sing, it's like 18,000 people.
Right.
You
It's
know,
quite the
it's a
audience. Yeah.
yes. I mean, so I've been lucky. Then when I do a show, if I do a bunch of cabarets and things. I'm really lucky to have an audience base to tap into, and you know, um, but so there's just numerous reasons why the Caps gig, while it's a perks job, those perks have been huge, and I wouldn't trade it for any sort of money that I might have made over the years, because it's what I've made in lieu of money has just been tremendous.
Yeah, this is good, especially for aspiring musicians of any kind. It's very easy to get, especially if you don't have money, to get tunnel vision and think, well, if it don't pay, it's not my way. But it seems that there are sometimes opportunities that can come your way from doing something. You have to be careful, of course, because you can be taken advantage of and you can drown yourself in gigs that don't pay. But the right gig that doesn't pay sometimes pays in interesting ways.
Well said, exactly. Really, just yeah, and along those lines, I can remember even, I don't know if it's a trick or a technique, but I can remember when I got out of Oberlin, I didn't know any better, but I met with some conductors, not really to audition, but to just coach, because I had just come out of Oberlin, and guess what? That was like an audition. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just, you know what I mean? It was just something I wasn't even really. But I tell young singers, today, I'm just like, well, if you, think about working with somebody, they might have time to hear you do some Bach, and oh, maybe their choral group is doing some Bach in the future. I mean, just stuff like that.
So you're
Things
talking
that,
about just calling someone up and asking, can I sing for you?
yeah, or can I coach with you? I mean, I think with me it was more just work, looking to help advance my, find somebody that was, you know, would be able to coach me in some music. Somebody I knew that had conducted, um, let's say Bach, and I knew that I was maybe doing a B minor mass, and I did that a couple of times early in my post Oberlin in my army career, and it turned into gigs, and I was like, ooh, that's not a bad idea. I mean, it wasn't quite like, well, I guess it was kind of cold calling, but
Yeah.
again, I wasn't just like, I was doing it to get something out of it for me to help me and pay this person. I wasn't just saying, "Can I sing for you?" I don't know, you know what I mean? It's
You
like,
offered to pay them.
oh yeah, it
Yeah.
was like, "Can you coach me in this? I have a gig coming up. Can you coach me?" And I did, and then I got a gig out of him, and I paid him, and anyway,
Yeah.
I just bring that up as something that I feel like I didn't really know how savvy that was, but it's something that I think some younger singers might not even think of.
Yeah. So let's reiterate. Essentially, if you have an opportunity to perform, you may attract the interest of somebody at a higher level who would just be happy to just work with you. It's perfectly fine to ask them if you have a gig. If you don't have a gig, you're just kind of maybe tugging on their sleeve. But if you have an actual reason to be asking them for their help, they very well may help you.
Absolutely, and because a lot of those folks are coaches themselves, and they don't do it much anymore, and they might, I mean, most people enjoy being asked for help or advice, or especially if they're going to get paid.
Right. Is there anyone in particular, or do you have a story about a particular coaching that was fun for you, or that you liked, or was important?
Oh gosh. I mean, I don't know if it was anything, I don't know if fun is the right word. I mean, the best, the coolest, and you'll appreciate this. I don't know if it was a coaching, and this was part of a, a show. So there was something called the Sondheim Celebration
Yeah,
in DC in 2002. And I was super lucky to be cast in three of the musicals, and one of them was Sweeney Todd. And I was in the ensemble. The mostly the leads were Broadway people, but
mhm,
they hired all these DC actors to play the small parts and be in the ensemble. And Sondheim was there all summer long. It was at the Kennedy Center, and he was literally like in the rehearsal rooms. And I was a member of the ensemble that sang the letter,
yeah,
in Act Two, and Todd sits down and most honorable Judge Turpin.
yeah.
Anyway, Sondheim, believe it or not, actually not surprising, it's his favorite number in the show. Um, and he literally he wanted to take the letter folks into a rehearsal room and work with and coach us on the letter, and he did.
Oh, wow.
So when I think of really cool, fun coachings that I've done,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was really a coaching, but he was so into it, and just to work with like the master. I mean, it was just I get goosebumps. I can't believe it actually happened.
Well, you know that I sent him a copy of the show we did.
I don't believe I know that. If
In fact, I did. I sent him a recording of our Sweeney Todd, and he replied. He listened
now
to it.
the studio
Yeah, the
or
studio.
the studio. Okay, all
Hmm.
right.
Yeah. So
And what did he
he said he enjoyed it.
very nice.
Yeah. So you were heard.
Well, that's that's awesome. That's awesome. I also I got to sing his 70th birthday. There was a 70th birthday concert at the Library of Congress that I was a
Mhm.
part of, and I got to chat with him a little bit there then, and I told him that I played the role of Sweeney, and he said, "I hear Sweeney in your voice." And I was like,
In fact, he
"Yes."
had. He had and just didn't know
Yeah,
it.
he had.
Yeah.
um yeah, so that was a pretty, mind-blowing moment when he took us into the rehearsal room and
That is a great story.
worked worked through the letter with us.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
was amazing.
clearly mentorship is important to you. It was important to you as on the underside. Talk about being a mentor on the top side and how you what that means to you.
Well, I mean, one of the things as I progressed in my Army career that I enjoyed doing is hiring young kids for this group that I loved and that I spent so much time with. And just basically hearing so many great voices. And sometimes again we would lose a great voice to, they decided to go to Juilliard or go to whatever. um, but I really, really feel good. I just tried to always hire somebody better than I would always just say, I want somebody better than me. That was
Mhm.
my kind of goal. And so I really feel good about, and I really enjoyed, you know, finding the voices and getting them there and trying to help them sort of become better artists and become better singers, and kind of, juggle the army and your outside life in a way that would be beneficial for everyone. Um, and then now, I'm actually speaking to the kids at the Wolf Trap opera coming up about careers in music.
Mm.
I mean, careers in the military and music. Because again, most of these kids, the Wolf Trap program is amazing, and a lot of these kids are going to be singing at the Met within a few years, but they're not all, and so I think it's just, just for have a couple hours. I think it's smart of Wolf Trap to bring me in just to say, hey, you probably right now there may be some eye rolling, but I'm just going to throw this out, because it's a pretty amazing gig for the right, if you're the right person, and you may be the right person. And the whole service to your country thing is something that I hadn't really wasn't really on my radar when I joined, but I mean, there certainly is a sense of that, which is hard to put into words. That's kind of just an added bonus to the fact that you also it's a great job and you're getting paid to sing
Hmm.
regularly, which even the great singers, there's fits and starts, right? I mean, it's not always just first of the month, 15th of the month, first of the month, 50. That's why during COVID, it was like everybody was like, shit, I got to join a band, you know?
Right. Well, and it's important that you said the idea that you can serve your country and be a musician. That is something that I don't think it occurs to most people that you could actually do both.
Yeah. I mean, and depending on, again, Adam, I was shocked that I was able to artistically do some things too within, I mean, um, it was a huge bonus. I mean, people forget that in the military, they have every kind of job. People think of the military and it's like the infantry, but they have cooks, they have truck drivers, they have everything. It's just like a, a world of all kinds of jobs. So yeah, so yeah, but a lot of these kids will trap, and it's just fun to go in and just tell them a little bit about what they're going to be making and what their hours are like, and just kind of it's nice to get the word out there, and hopefully if I can get once in a while somebody to think about it and join, great.
Any other advice for the singers that may be watching or the other musicians that might be watching?
Advice, I mean,
General,
just
just anything that is important to you that you'd like to convey.
gosh, I mean, I think hmm, that's a tough one. Again, keeping an open mind, and I think your point about going back to your point about the tunnel vision of money, I think is so important, and it is sometimes so important to just open up your mind and realize that while you're not getting paid, you may be getting paid in a way that you will never ever be able to understand. And I think I was always just I think open I just kept an open mind, and I tried a lot of different things. I think just don't, and I think teachers tend want to pigeonhole, right? And even my teacher at Oberlin, I mean, Richard Miller, who, was great for me to an extent, but he didn't want me to do, he was so mad that I did Sweeney. He was mad that because we had these, he didn't really understand what they were, right? And it wasn't necessarily his idea, maybe. And so there was always, it was always a battle. I always just fought that. And of course, yes, I did operas at Oberlin, and those were great too. But, the student theater that I did, I mean, Company with Seth Rudetsky, and
Hmm.
then Little Night Music
Hmm.
with Seth, and then Sweeney after that with Fred Lassen, both turning out to be, huge Broadway personalities and musicians. I mean, how lucky were we?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they were all wonderful productions. I was only in Sweeney, but I saw the other two. They were just tremendous.
And what was your class? Were you class of 91?
Class of 91, I stayed until 92. I stayed an extra year just to soak the place up a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, yeah, I guess what I'm just trying to say is like, I just always had my eyes wide open and went against often what my teacher's conservative approach to what I should be singing and that I might vocally. And of course, vocally, Sweeney ended up, I feel like vocally making me the best singer I've ever been,
Hmm.
and it was one of those things where it was like, you're going to ruin your voice. Like he thought that, but he
Hmm.
didn't understand, of course, this goes back to me. Sweeney Todd is like the great American opera, I would argue. I
Hmm.
mean, it could you. I mean, you could say that. I mean,
Hmm.
it's. I know it's controversial. I know Sondheim himself hated opera, but I don't think he really. Maybe I don't know.
No,
I'm
I
not
mean,
sure.
let's go there. Sweeney is more like an opera than any of his other musicals, and that's clear.
Hmm. Totally,
Yeah.
totally. And I think, again, I think there's some. I think I've always enjoyed Sweeney's more by singers who can act than actors that can sing. I don't know if that's totally true. Whereas a lot of the other Sondheim, maybe it's just the way it's written out. You know, every each role is a little bit different, but I think you could make an argument that, to me, that again, Sweeney is the great American 20th century opera. Um, but again, you know, nowadays especially, I mean, the fact that one of my problems with Oberlin, you know, looking back, is that, you know, the conservatory, there was no training, no kind of musical theater. There was just nothing, right? And I
Mhm.
mean, that's just the kids coming into school today. I mean, they have to teach everything, even singing with a microphone. I learned to do that in the army, but I mean, that would have been a great class to have in a conservatory.
Mhm.
You know, you don't have to perfect it, but just have a session with somebody that knows how to sing jazz and knows how to sing with the mic, you know? Because guess what? You're gonna have an audition one day when they're gonna be like, we need something from the Great American Songbook. And you're gonna be like, oh, well, you know. So I think Oberlin, it's changed a bunch, and I'm sure schools are doing this, but I look back and I'm just like, it seemed crazy that there was the only musical theater we got was getting together in Wilder Hall and going, let's do this.
Put on a show.
Yeah.
Well, I have to ask because that was pretty brave of you to buck Richard Miller. He's a legend. Were you at all afraid when you did these sorts of things, or are you just kind of like, I do what I want?
I was afraid, but we had kind of, I was also, we had had so many battles. And I think I had kind of, by the time Sweeney rolled around, I had been with them for nearly 4 years. And so it was like, I don't think, even in the greatest teacher ever, I think that's maybe too long, you know?
Hmm.
I think maybe I was hoping to have a different teacher my last year or two. I don't know, like maybe subconsciously. Um, but I also I've known Sweeney since it came out. I had the stupid, you know, I had the recording, and I knew getting that role. I mean, I might have been afraid, but oh my God, I am not going to say, you know, come on. I knew how great it was. And of course, Company is what freshman year, Company is what got me turned on to Sondheim and really started it. And so then Carl Magnus and night music, and then it was just like the perfect graduation. I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, if people are curious about all this Sweeney talk, they need to know that on our TourMU site, I have the recording of the show, and anyone can watch it.
I was
It's
going to say, you have is that the YouTube,
yes,
the video?
yes,
Okay.
the video of the complete show is there, and it's
Well,
been watched many times.
and thank you for having that on there, because it's just awesome to have it on there. And I know I've got several family members and friends that have gone back to see it. And um yeah, I've been lucky since that production. I did the role one more time, and then I did it at the Kennedy Center when I was in the ensemble. And ironically, I understudied the judge in that production.
Hmm.
Um, and then I directed it at Sidwell. So it's been a it's been a it's been a big part of my life. And it was, you know, just I wish, you know, in the perfect world, I have one left. I feel like I'm finally able to do Sweeney, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like I look back at the video, and there's certain, overall, I'm like super happy with it. There's a couple things where I'm just like, how would I even know to, you know, of course I didn't know what I was doing there, you know. We had some
Well,
pretty heavy stuff to throw at a bunch of, you know, 20 year olds, right?
yeah. Well, we didn't think we were young at the time.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. But boy, were we lucky. How great was, I mean, Fred, and like just how tight it was musically. And
Hmm.
I
And
mean,
James
when
Sugg, the
I
director,
oh,
quite intelligent, wonderfully brave, and he even got
James,
the he got the chair. He got the chair, the real chair.
yeah, yeah. I mean, James's vision from the beginning. I can remember meeting with him. I don't know if it was a year before, but it was like, I mean, this had been on his mind for a long time. And of course, I've actually been in touch with James and seen him a couple times. And we talk occasionally, and I'm always like, James, don't you want to let's get the band back? Or that was the other thing. I was like, let's have a Oberlin Sweeney reunion concert or party, get Fred to sit. But anyway,
Wow, what a great idea. Oh, well,
yeah,
personally, I couldn't have been any luckier to have been in that cast. And I found your role inspiring, and I carried it with me many years. So thank you very
oh,
much for what you did. Yeah,
thanks, Adam.
yeah.
I it was special, and I wish, yeah, I wish I could. Well, I don't know what I wish. I'm just super lucky to have been in that. We were all super lucky to be in that spot at that moment. Um, yeah, and thank you for having evidence, keeping evidence of it, and putting it on the YouTube.
My pleasure. And thank you for having this conversation with me. It's really been a joy.
Yeah, my pleasure, and thanks for having me. And good luck with good luck with it moving forward,
Thank you. I hope you get to play Sweeney again. People, if you're watching and you have a role for Mr. McDonald, please, he's looking to do it one more time.
for sure.
Thank you also, audience. As always, it's a joy to bring these interviews to you. I hope you're finding them useful. The only way I can know that for sure is if you leave comments and if you put that like button. Please let us know what you like and what you'd like to see more of. And we will see you next time.